Hello everybody and happy Friday. Welcome to the Illustration Masterclass with me, Kyle Webster. Today we're going to have a very relaxed, laid-back show where we're just going to go through the brand new Summer 2021 brush update for Photoshop and Adobe Fresco. There are quite a few brushes in here to get to and to explore and look at. And I'm excited because these updates happen about once every quarter, and I love to just show everybody some ways that you can work with these brushes. But of course, you will find many of your own creative ways to use them in your own illustration work, of course. So let us take a look here, and we're going to get started. This is a silly drawing I did while I was getting the show set up today of a, I call it Huffy Bat. It's just Batman walking away in a huff. I don't understand what I'm doing. Hi, folks in the chat. I see Wade is here. Hello, and Mercurial, and Steven, and Alan, and Annika, and Eow. Timothy, what's going on? And Umacorn is here, and Uriel, and Mary, and Sagor. Hello. How's it going, everybody? Hope you're all doing well, and thanks for joining me. So, first things first, when I say brush update, what am I talking about? If you are a subscriber to Photoshop or Fresco, about once a quarter, but also a couple of times a year, there are these special brush updates we'll do from time to time that have a theme to them, such as the Keith Haring brushes that were released earlier this year. And a couple of years ago, we had an Inktober brush set, things like that. When we do these special brushes, we will release them to everybody via a couple of different channels. There are different ways to access them, is what I'm saying. First of all, if you're in your brushes panel here in Photoshop, a very easy way to get to the brush download page is simply tap on this little drop-down menu in the top right corner, and then come down here to get more brushes. Now, by doing that, it's going to launch this page that will ask you to sign in right here. So you can sign in, and that will then allow you to download all of the many brushes, approaching 2,000 brushes now that are available to you all in many different categories. And like I said, about once a quarter, we update these with a seasonal update. That's today what I'm talking about, which is the Summer 2021 brushes. If you are in Fresco, if you open up your brushes panel and select any brush, you'll notice that at the bottom of that list of brushes, there's a little plus sign, a little plus icon. Well, by tapping on that, you can immediately, within the app, access all of the brushes in a library format. And you can simply follow whichever library you want. These are the same brushes, so that's another easy way to do it. And finally, you can, on your browser, just type in Adobe, Photoshop, Kyle, Brushes, and you'll find a link to that brushes page where you can log in and download the brushes. All right, so let's get started. I'm going to start at the very top of the list with the Billow brush. And this brush gets its name from billowing clouds. This is what I was thinking of, the billowy kind of clouds, because you'll see as I start to paint with it, that with very light pressure, all right, I get this nice, soft, sort of cloudy look. Okie dokie. There you go. Now, when you bear down more, you get a much harsher effect where you're going to also see a good bit of color dynamics in play here, right? But what I like to do is use it with light pressure and then just build up color and texture gradually, all right? That's what I'm going to do here. So what I find this very useful for is skies, for painting skies. So, you know, I could quickly come in here and just paint this in, maybe get a lighter color, come in here and suggest a few sort of cloudy shapes. After all, that is where it gets its name from. There you go. But you can see how quickly you can just throw in a nice little sky like this with this brush. Pretty easy peasy, right, gang? And there you have it. So, back and forth. I like to then just sample color from the canvas, make these softer transitions here and there wherever I can. But you get the idea. That is the Billow brush. Now, that's just one way to work with this. Of course, you'll find other ways to use this in your own work, I'm sure. But I do find that it's just really handy for a quick, sort of impressionistic sky like that. So I'll zoom in so you can see all the texture there. Bit of canvas texture mixed in. That's a new canvas texture I created a couple months ago that I'm using for a few of these brushes, and I like it a lot. All right, so that's the Billow brush. Thank you, Mercurial. I'm glad you like these grass brushes. Yeah, I'll show you some of those here in just a moment. We'll get to those for sure. Alrighty, now, there you go. Here comes a grass brush right away. This one's called Blades 1. And in a moment, I'll combine some of these grass brushes to show you how you could paint a really nice little field of grass. But just to quickly demonstrate what this looks like, I'll go ahead and grab a green here. This one is for painting individual blades, okay? And quickly filling out a space where you can see all those blades of grass. Alrighty. And note that the bottom of the brush stamp for this one is softer, okay? And that is so that you can lay these over one another. As you get to the foreground, you want to use more pressure, make those blades bigger. Use medium pressure throughout the middle here. And as I get closer here, just really bear down and fill that in. You see how quick and easy that is. So this is what you're dealing with here. Is a tiny bit of color dynamics, all right? A soft transition at the bottom of the brush stamp so that overlaying the brush strokes is still a smooth thing where you don't notice that there's a bottom to the stamp so much, right? Makes it very easy to paint in wide strokes a field of grass. But that's the Blades 1 brush. That's one way to work with the grass brushes here. You could simply use that one brush and just paint away until you have a result like this. Variants here. So Blades 2, similar idea, bigger brush and a bit more of a messy, I would say, grass look to it. So the blades are going to go in several different directions. There's a bit more angle jitter with these brushes. And it's important to mention that all of these brushes, of course, they're designed to look and behave a certain way, but that shouldn't stop you from playing with the brush settings and getting something to be a little bit different than what comes out of the box, all right? And so, for example, if I wanted to have a bit more angle jitter here, I would simply open up my brush settings, go to Shape Dynamics, and increase the brush jitter. Angle jitter, there you go. All right, so now when I paint, they're gonna go even more haphazardly, okay? So maybe that's the kind of look you wanna go for the grass that you're painting. Yeah, don't be afraid to mess around with these settings because they're not fixed. Don't worry about it. If you go ahead and change the settings, you're not going to ruin the brush. It's not like it's going to remain in that state. You can always select another brush and then come back to that brush and it'll reset to its original values. However, if you create a brush that you really, really like, okay, a variant of this, and you decide, well, it'd be nice if I could keep that brush. So for example, I made changes here to angle jitter. Remember that you can always come down here to the bottom of your brushes panel and tap on this little plus icon. and that'll allow you to create a brand new brush, and it'll just drop it in your list right under the original brush. So you could have variants of a brush and save those as well. Okie dokie. Let's look at Blades Soft. Now, this one has a very different stamp. You can see right away when I paint with it that there is an out of focus area behind every instance of that brush stamp. So this can create basically a sense that there is grass behind the blades that are more in focus, okay? And when you layer this one, okay, which I'll do here, I'll do some small ones back here, controlling the size with pressure, that's all I'm doing, I'm using pen pressure, okay? What I like about this one is you get these nice little groupings of visible, clear blades, but then you get these patches where it's a little softer and it's not so sharp. And this can give you a very realistic appearance of a field of grass where some of the greens just kind of blend together. Some of the darker ones stand out. And I find that using this brush to start with to get some grass down is a really good technique. If you then want to, over top of that, add a bit of detail, you can come back to, say, that Blades 2 brush, and here and there you can throw in a few blades. Okay, see what I mean? So by using this other brush here, this Blades 2, I'm just adding a few bits and pieces here that are more in focus, okay, wherever I choose. And so the combination of those two gives you some excellent results. And the other thing too is that if you do this the right way, you're going to wind up with a result that doesn't have a lot of noticeable repetition. And this is something we're always going for with our digital painting, is trying to create tools that are going to speed up your workflow without making your work look too manufactured, too plastic, too samey, too repetitive. We want these brushes to have enough of a variety in the marks they make to make it interesting for the viewer, right? And so that is really something that the combination of these two brushes will help you accomplish. All right. So let's see. Blades 1 is for far away. Blades 2 is for rough, or fairway and rough. I see, Steven. Haha, little golf action there. Sure, if you want to look at it that way, that's one way to look at it. Then you've discovered this whole new world in 2 weeks. You've learned so much. That's awesome. Glad to hear that. So glad. Pen pressure is just on iPad with iPencil. No, Uriel. Pen pressure is depending on any tablet you're using, any brand of tablet, Wacom. And if I use Wacom tablets for when I'm on Photoshop and I'm using my MacBook and a Wacom tablet. But yeah, any pressure sensitive pen and tablet will achieve these results. Where am I now? All right, so that's Blades 2. Blades Soft, we've looked at those together. I'll move on now to Brushworks. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna skip that I'll come back to that, because I do want to go down to these Grassland brushes and just show you how they work in combination with these brushes we were just using here. I'll create a layer underneath this one. And look at this, I'm just going to quickly paint in a bit of grass back behind what I just painted in the foreground there. So you can see that this Grassland brush gives you the ability to softly layer some distant grassy hills off like that. So that's a really easy way to just take these two brushes and combine them to give the illusion of there being a field that recedes off into the distance. I wanted to show you that because it's a nifty effect. There's a variant of that called Grassland 2. And I'll just go ahead and start from scratch with this one so you can see how I use this. But I really just kind of think about a general shape for the grass. So I'm just going to have it sloping down to the left here. And then I'll go ahead and fill that in. And already you get some nice variance in the hue and saturation and value there. But then what I like to do is go slightly darker with the color and work in as I get closer and closer, and then slightly darker again, using more pressure here in the foreground like that. And this allows me to create a bit of distance. The darker areas appear to get a little closer to me as they overlap the others, and you can see how that works. So I find that to be a nice way to work. And then of course I could come back to the blades soft if I want to draw some bigger blades here in the foreground like that. And then I can just come over the top of that, sort of cut into it. Hopefully, you're getting some ideas watching me do this for your own work. I hope. All right, so using those together is very nice. All right, now let's come back to that Brushworks. Brushworks is one of these painterly kinds of brushes that you can use for just big chunky paint strokes that are all broken up and they're full of texture. This brush, in fact, in addition to using it for painting, right? And it's going to respond, by the way, to the angle and tilt of the brush, so I can change the direction that way. I'm just rotating my wrist as I draw to change that direction. But this brush can actually be used simply for creating texture. So let's go ahead and do that. So here's a kitty cat. Just make it a lasso shape and then do this. Just kind of changing the direction, changing the pressure I'm using. And there you have a nice little cat silhouette that's filled with some nice texture in it. And I can grab the very next brush, which is the cracked Nibby, and add some whiskers. And that's kind of it. You're done. So yeah, this Brushworks can be used strictly for painting. If you want to paint with it, great. Grab another color. And it does respond to pressure for changing the opacity as well as revealing the texture. So you can do some nice transitions from one color to another by using lighter pressure and then sampling the color in between those two like this. Okay, check that out. Pretty handy. This one also is taking advantage of that brand new canvas texture that I've created, and you'll find it hidden in that Billow brush also. Speaking of the next brush, Cracked Nibby, this is for drawing, and I actually drew that silly Batman drawing from the beginning of the show with that brush. Not sure where that was. Oops. Did a lot of drawing today. Here it is. This was drawn with the Cracked Nibby. And let's see what that line looks like. Let's zoom in on that. What's going to happen is you're going to have the line periodically just kind of break apart altogether. This is very nice for those cartoonists out there who like there to be some personality in their lines, as well as even, you know, happy accidents, things like that. Stuff that just isn't that predictable. You still have control over what you're drawing. It's not to say you don't have control, right? I mean, I can draw with it. But I also am going to get some pretty cool variation in the in every line that I do draw, right? I don't know who this weird guy is. I guess he's a vampire. You can see how fun that is to draw with. Give you a lot of nice, unpredictable stuff happening, while still giving you the ability, of course, to control what it is that you're doing. To a degree, you know. All right, so that's what that is. Oh, it's me with elf ears. Once I added the hair, we knew it wasn't me. Okay, so yeah, for those of you who are fans of the inking tools, well, got a couple of new ones for you here. This one is the Cracked Nibby, but we also have Carving Nibby, okay, just underneath it. And this one has a very different feel to it. I can't really explain it. First of all, the flow is a little more, it's gonna kick out a bit more ink for you when you're drawing with it, but you can still get really faint broken lines if you use very light pressure, and a good range of thick to thin. So here we go, thin all the way to that. So that is a pretty big range. And the stamp for this brush was designed, I believe, at about 300 pixels. So this is set at only 70 pixels right now for drawing. But if you wanted to really get a line down that was huge, you could size your brush up using the bracket keys. I like to use the key commands. So, you know, these two keys on your keyboard, bracket keys, you can size it up. I'm going to size it up to 175 pixels, for example. And look at that. You're not going to have any pixelization with that. Still going to be clean. Okay. So if you need to do some really big, broad, inky stuff, it could be great for posters or whatnot. I have some good stuff. Mary asks, do I come up with the names? I do. I'm kind of shocked that I'm still able to come up with anything original after almost 2,000 brushes. But yes, they all have different names, and I'm really happy with most of the names. Hopefully I can continue to come up with new ones. So, Carving Nibby, yes, that's a fun one. And again, this is for you inkers out there who like to draw with something a bit less predictable. All right, something a little less clean, right? We like our ratty, broken inkers, don't we? We're gonna kick it into this interesting painting category with the Disastro brushes. It's a brand new category here that I've been playing with and enjoying a lot. These are good for lots of things. I'm gonna start with how useful they are for backgrounds. So let's say you wanna just quickly throw in a dynamic background that has some variation in it and some texture and just some interest. It's not distracting or anything, but it's just not flat. So here with this Disastro brush, the way these work is they sample color from the foreground and the background. So at the moment I have black as the foreground color and white for the background color. When I paint with it, you'll notice that you're getting strokes that have some dark and some light and everything in between. And this is all just down to how much pressure I use. So light pressure means I'm going to sample more of the white, and dark pressure, heavy pressure means I'm going to sample more of the dark color, okay? Or whatever you have in the foreground and the background. So if I change my background color to like a yellow, then look what happens now. It's going to do all this crazy stuff. Now you might say, well, that doesn't look like a yellow. Well, that's because color dynamics are in play for not just pressure, but also for hue and saturation and value as random settings. And you can fiddle with all of that here in the brush settings under color dynamics. So if I don't want that hue jitter, I can just turn it down to like 3%. And now you'll see light pressure is going to give me a color a lot closer to what I sampled there. Okay, but for those of you who are just looking for a way to create a quick, down and dirty, full of energy, full of action background, right? And this is a great way to start a painting, by the way, I will say. Really, this is just a cool way to start by, it's almost like using a ground, you know, when you're painting with oils or acrylics and you put down a neutral kind of a ground, like usually some raw umber or something, or, you know, just to kind of put a color down on the canvas that isn't white. But this could be a nifty way to start a painting. Just throw down with the Disastro brush a nice background, and then you could start, you know, adding some blocking in some stuff, you know, so I want to block in some shapes here. Okay. And get this really, really dark here. Size it down, etc., etc. And now I'm sort of on my way to getting something that will eventually turn into something. I don't know. Of course, I wouldn't draw it like that. I would have to paint and pay attention to what I'm doing, but you get the idea. Anyway, this brush is, yeah, for the painters out there, some pretty nifty things you can do with it, and there are some interesting variants included in the pack here. And I wish I could show it to you, but I forgot to obtain permission before the show. But one of my favorite comics artists, I lent these brushes to him early on for testing to see what he could do, and he did this amazing Nosferatu painting with it. I wish I could show that to you. I should have obtained permission. I'll go ahead and post it on Twitter. So if you're not following me on Twitter, it's at Kyle T. Webster. I'm just asking if I can share that with everybody, because it shows you what you could do with this Disastro brush if you take your time and don't just mess around like I am here. I'm not sure how long it took him. He's so good and he's so fast. It probably only was about an hour of work, the thing he sent me, but it was this really slick Nosferatu painting. Super cool. Like everything he does. Super cool like everything. I'm going to get carried away if I'm not careful here. So, all right. Anyway, I do like the way this brush works. I think you all will enjoy it. And if not using it for simply painting, just knocking in some cool backgrounds and everything. Remember, it uses both the foreground color and the background color. Okay, remember that, because you are going to be able to use pen pressure to control how much of each of these it's using, right? Now, important to mention that this does not work in Fresco yet. Okay, the brush works. You can paint with it, but it's not going to. Behave in quite the same way, because in Fresco we don't yet have the background color in play. But be aware that we're messing with that, and we're just not quite ready, but that's going to be something that's going to be coming your way before too long. Okay, gang? So don't worry. All right, let's look at some variants of this quickly. We have Disastro Spatter. I really like this one because, as you can see, when you paint with it, there's a spatter that is being employed with the dual brush. So you're going to get directional brush strokes where you can clearly see which way the artist is moving the brush, okay? But you're also going to get these random spatter elements in there. Zoom in here. So this is excuse me, this is very dynamic. Look at this. It's really little dots everywhere, and sometimes a nice big splotch. Okay, kind of a cool mix of two different kinds of brushes, you know, spatter and then a more sort of painterly brushstroke kind of situation here. I really like this one for the same reasons, you know, great for throwing in a dynamic painterly background. But also for painting, you know, don't forget you can size it down and you can do some smaller stuff if you need to. So pan around here for a second, let you have a look at that. That is the Disastro Spatter. Change it up with our colors here, have some fun. And here is Disastro Leaf. This is a weird one. This one, if you look, has some negative space that cuts out these leaf shapes. So what I really like about this one is you can suggest sort of foliage in the background while still having some of these random weird textural elements and color changes and whatnot. I see this one being pretty darn useful for people who are doing picture books and really like to work in an expressive way to suggest things rather than to paint them in a literal way. To me, this is the kind of tool that someone like the late great Eric Carle, he just would have enjoyed, I think, something like this. I can't speak for him, of course, but I would have loved to have sat down with him sometime and showed him what's possible with some of this kind of stuff, you know, with the latest digital technology with brushes, and I'd love to see what he would do with something like this. You know, lighten the color, come over top of this and see what you can do, layering all this together. Super fun. Pause here and see if you have any questions. Let's see. Thanks, Stony. Are these brushes free to download? Yeah, Gilead, they are if you have a subscription to Photoshop or Fresco, or I think any Adobe subscription, you can still have access to the brush library. How do you get these brushes? Yeah, Ven, that's at the beginning of the show. We talked about it. Very easy, several ways to do it. If you're already in Photoshop, just tap over here on this little drop-down menu in Photoshop and go to Get More Brushes. Simple as that. Does it automatically do the color changes? Misty, yes and no. I mean, it's going to have a little bit of variation when you paint with it, but heavy pressure with your pen is going to access more of the foreground color, okay, which is blue in this case. Lighter pressure is going to access more of the background color, okay, and medium pressure is going to blend the two, see? So that's how that happens. Pretty cool. You can always turn all that off if you don't want to do it that way. Just come over here to brush settings, turn off color dynamics. Okay. But yeah, look at this. This is the kind of thing that I think, you know, for picture books, it's so fun. Just cover the whole background with this, right? Sort of suggest a little forest or jungle environment or something. All these little leafy shapes poking through. These more painterly brush strokes, lots of texture in there. Fun, right? And then on top of that, you'd have your jungle cat, you know? So like we could make ourselves a little selection here, go darker, go with a darker green. Whoops, and then paint our ground, and then make our jungle cat right here and do a little tiger. Do orange. Let's do like a reddish color for the foreground color, and then a nice sort of yellow for the background color, like that. A little yellower if I can make it a little brighter yellow. There we go. And do that. See? Cool, right? And there you go. And then just throw in some stripes. and maybe some shapes here. There, picture book. All right. Probably not quite, but you get the idea, right? Alrighty, so moving on. There's a variant of that brush as well. Try that one out. It's a lot more spattery. Fun to work with. Which leads us to Fraid Fred, and this is another brushy brush. Good for doing liney, like brush line painting and drawing, you know, where you want to have a lot of broken up stuff with the quality of line. But again, you know, for those of you who do comics and things like that, it's nice to be able to work with a brush like this where you can change it up. You know, but also check this out, you know, let's do something like this. Let's say you want to do like a Roman column kind of design with that carving Nibby. And then you come over to that Fraid Fred brush. And you just kind of rough up under here and then off to the right, this one side here. Do a little shadow over here, whatever. And there you go. So like that's a cool little spot illustration for something, you know? You see painting in your weekend. Awesome, awesome. Does Keenard Park work digitally? Don't know. Good question. Okay, so there you go. But combining those brushes that way I think is a good thing. Quick departure now from this because we're moving back into our territory with grass and whatnot. You may recall the grass brushes from the beginning. I'm just going to grab one of those quickly. Where is my soft? Here we go, Blade Soft. And well, let's just throw some grass in here. Okay, there we go. So we got some grass. And now let's go ahead and this is what you just for fun, you know, you need a little bit of variation. You take the grass weed brush and you just pop a few of these here and there. See what I mean? And it just adds a bit more life to that grass. Okay, that's all that's for. That's the whole point of it. Just to give it a bit more life, right? Add some variation here and there. I think that's pretty useful. And that is why that brush is included. We've talked about the Grassland brushes. Now let's talk about Hedgies. Now, for just to start off with, this is what the Hedgy brush looks like. All right, you can see some nice, do some bushes or some little foliage in the background. This can also work really great for trees, for canopies of, you know, trees. Let me show you how I would use it. I'm gonna make it a little smaller. I think this is a great way to do it. You make it really dark, okay? And go ahead and fill in the area where you're gonna have some hedgy bits, some foliage, okay? And then go lighter. And at the top, and a little bit throughout the body of that shape, that silhouette, that's where you add some other bits. These are the bits that are catching some light, okay? And that's the secret to making that look good. So dark followed by light on top. So you work dark to light. And I think you get some good results. You can even go a little lighter than that here and there if you want to have some bits that really have some, they're catching more light. A little highlight here and there. But you need those shadows, those shadow shapes to create depth. Okay, so that's the secret to making that work. Now, how would that apply to a tree? So you could imagine let's go ahead and do our basic tree here. This is going to be really not a great tree shape, but you're going to get the idea. It's just for demo, okay? All right, so I'll have this shape here, and let's go ahead and throw some foliage on top of it. Remember, start with the dark. And I'm just making a bunch of shapes there for that canopy. Okay. And we'll throw a little branch out that way. Now I go for the lighter color, and I just hit the top, as well as some bits here in the middle, to suggest that this is more coming towards me. This is catching light. This little section here is catching some light. See? That's all there is to it. And that's how you can quickly throw a bit of foliage in there. Okay? Now you can do, I know you all can do a better job than that, but you get the idea, right? You get the idea. Brushes are quite large. If I reset it, you'll see it's 700 pixels. So, I mean, you could do this for a high-res image, no problemo. Let's look at what else we have. The Hedgy Spatter brush will give you the added benefit of a bit of spatter baked in there. Isn't that nice? Just a bit more texture, a bit more interest. This is going to respond to pen pressure for the size. So I can go off in the distance and have smaller bits here and there. And as I get closer, they're going to get larger and larger and larger. Okay. Make a big mess there. But you know, if you want to clean that up, go ahead and do some lighter shapes on top, etc. But that one's using opacity as well. Hedgy Mix does not use that much. Okay, this is going to be, for the most part, a solid amount of opacity there. Okay, slight variation here and there, but for the most part, much more solid. Hedgy Dense does probably what you would be able to guess based on the title. Much more quickly fill in an area, okay, with some dense foliage. Simple as that. Okay, there you go. Hedgy Fade gives you a softer bottom to the stamp. Okay, so not so opaque at the bottom. See that? If I use lighter pressure too, just kind of fades down into your ground layer. Okay, so that can be nice if you're trying to make it not sit up on top of the ground so much, but just kind of fade in there. That's very useful. All right, let's move on to the Knockabout. So, Knockabout. This one is just like your Disastro brushes, and it allows you to sample foreground and background color to paint, only it's got a very different quality to it with the brush strokes, as you can see. Okay, and there's a variant of this, which is a bit more intense with this texture that's built in. See how it has a graininess to it? So I also find this one useful for skies. Grabbing a nice rich blue with a white behind it, so I can go back and forth between those two hues as I paint my sky. See that? That can be quite lovely to work with. The Linoleum inker is a very clean inker. But you know me, I don't make things too clean, right? So there's just a bit of noise to the edge of the stroke. It really just has a very natural feel. Highly recommend you draw with this one if you're into doing drawings that require some really fine line work, but you don't want things to look, you know, too perfect, okay? But still, ton of control, thick to thin, lots of control for you there. And I really like that one. It's quite small, so it's for fine work. Plantina. Again, with Plantina, same advice. Start dark, okay? So it's kind of like ivy, you know? Get your shapes down. And so here's the shape I want for this grouping here. All right, then go light and hit a few of those areas throughout. Make sure you get the top as well. And that's going to give you that depth where you can see inside, and just looks so much better. Okay, so dark to light. Plantina 2, same deal, very different quality to it. Okay, it's much more jungly, more tropical, but same rules apply. You know, if you want to work dark to light, good for layering. Plantina 2B is going to have more distortion in every brush stroke, so a bit more variety. It's also got, as you can see, a texture that is like a photocopied kind of a feel to it, if you will. Thru Blinds is one of those weird brushes I made by accident, where I don't even know how to describe this thing other than I love it. Because it's fun to just do these blocky shapes with it. And you can see where its name comes from, the blinds, because of the horizontal lines that get created there when I use light pressure. And you occasionally will get that leafy pattern amongst the lines. So this is just a peculiar brush. And I know you're going to find some cool things to do with it. I know you will. And you'll pardon me if I'm hurrying a little bit, but I do want to make sure we get through all of these. Rakechunk is also going to use foreground and background color. So if I were to change that background color to yellow, light pressure, dark pressure, look how pretty that is. So there's some nifty stuff you can do with this brush for sure. It's got its own variant as well. The variant is going to be a lot more receptive to pressure for texture. Rough Glosser is a painterly brush for everybody that takes advantage of Photoshop's wet edges, which means that it's going to be a slightly lighter stroke when you paint with it. Okay, but when you bear down with pressure, it does the opposite of what you'd expect. It actually gets a little bit lighter. And then when you overlay these, you get these cool translucent effects. Try that one. Scale crunch is so fun. I did this for like painting dragons and other scaly things, monsters and things like that. I just love how it feels to use this for scaly textures. And the variant is going to give you more scales in a much more predictable fashion. And they're also going to be responsive to pen pressure for opacity. And as you can see, lots of good color variation in there thanks to the power of color dynamics. Those are working out really nicely for you there. I really like those for picture book work as well. We finished with Scratch Rat, which is another inker that is just a complete mess. It is so bumpy and gritty. And I really love it for just drawing things that are going to have a lot of texture and a lot of grit. That's what it's good for. And I think, again, for comics folks, you need a little extra punch on the side. You know, you're drawing something that's really clean, but you need to throw in a little texture. This is your friend. There you go, folks. Well, that's a lot of brushes to get through. It's a big, fat update. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for hanging out with me. Hope you all have a great weekend. And remember to grab these brushes and tell me what you think about them. Play around. Have a good time. Take care of each other. Take care of yourselves. Please be kind. And I'll see you next time. Ciao for now.